What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, December 12th, 2016, getting on through the month, almost coming up on Christmas. 1 week from today is when the Electoral College meets to vote, and the situation has just reached a point of absolute silliness. And if there wasn't so much at stake, I think pretty much everybody would be rolling around on the ground laughing at just how absurd this effort is from the Hillary Clinton campaign to find some way for Hillary to get that White House. And we're going to be talking about that here at length during this first hour. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little announcement. The White House has now canceled plans for a Christmas nativity scene. Although there are plenty of jackasses around Washington, D.C., they could not find 3 wise men or a virgin. So that little bit of holiday cheer is going to be absent from the state capitol. On a more serious note, and getting into the election circus, a federal judge has now blocked the Pennsylvania recount request, basically saying that Jill Stein lacks standing. There is no evidence anything was going on that was untoward. And Jill Stein now concedes the Michigan recount is a bust. They don't dare push that one any further because of all the election fraud that's been uncovered favoring Hillary Clinton. Now, the Nevada recount is also over. And Trump is still the winner, although not in Nevada, but Hillary's margin over Trump shrank in Nevada. I mean, just razor thin. But as far as Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Trump is still the winner. Hillary is still the loser. Stein's political career is toast. And they spent enough money on the Michigan recount to build an entire new safe water system for the city of Flint, Michigan. But hey, governing is choosing, and governing is prioritizing, and Hillary Clinton is much more important than all those people in Flint, Michigan, who are suffering permanent, irreversible brain damage from all the lead in their drinking water, while Nestle continues to pump fresh water out of Michigan's aquifers for pennies on the dollar. Now, the Hillary Clinton campaign is out there. They're writing on this story that appeared over the weekend about how the CIA had sent a secret report to Congress confirming that Russia had hacked the election for Donald Trump. And they've been pounding this thing all weekend long. And the story was suspect right from the beginning because we have a government that cannot find the cyber criminals, cannot find the ransomware writers, even after years and years and years of effort. And yet only a few days after Obama says we must investigate this, we're being told the CIA has absolute proof that Russia hacked the election. And so now Hillary Clinton is calling for an intelligence briefing for the Electoral College this week before they're able to vote. They want to just go on in there and just put out all those things about how Donald Trump may have links to Russia, that Russia may have interfered with our election. Now, I think we can pretty much assume that Hillary does not want to brief the Electoral College on how she sold 20% of America's uranium to Russia in exchange for Russian money pouring into that Clinton Foundation. I'm pretty certain Hillary does not want to brief the Electoral College on how Saudi Arabia funded a large chunk of her campaign and was expecting to have influence over her White House. And I'm sure that Hillary Clinton is not going to brief the Electoral College on how George Soros funded even more of her campaign and is expecting her cooperation, or was expecting her cooperation on his agenda here. And of course, let's not forget Israel, which is routinely interfering in all of our elections through AIPAC, but we're not going to talk about that. No, it's only Russia and it's only Trump. Now, Obama has upped the ante on this situation, rejecting conspiracy theories, and basically the White House spokesperson has come on out and said, as a fact, that Donald Trump asked Russia to hack Hillary Clinton. That's what they're saying. They've actually committed to making that. Now, remember back during the third debate where Hillary Clinton set up this whole idea that Russia was going to hack the election on behalf of Donald Trump? So they were setting this up as a fallback strategy all along in case she lost. And the fact that there actually still is a Hillary campaign tells you somebody's still signing those paychecks. You would have thought after the election all those people would be looking for new jobs. Nope. They're still going strong here. And here is where it really gets interesting. The CIA has just issued a statement saying that no, in point of fact, they did not send any kind of a secret report to Congress saying that Russia hacked the election. Either somebody in Congress is making this up, or the Washington Post created this story out of thin air, the same way they did that story smearing the independent media as being Russian propaganda outlets. So somebody lied somewhere. And by the way, the FBI is out there saying they cannot find any evidence Russia had anything to do with hacking the election. The only hard evidence of hacking so far is coming from the state of Georgia, which is still demanding to know why the Department of Homeland Security was trying to break into their voter information database. That's the only hard evidence of hacking that's been going on. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about this ludicrous claim that Russia hacked the U.S. election to help Donald Trump, and Hillary is now out there screaming the Electoral College has to take this into account before they vote a week from today. Now, we're starting to see a smear job coming out of the corporate media where they're out there saying that even if Trump becomes president, he's now seen as illegitimate. There's a dark cloud hanging over his presidency because Russia obviously helped him win this election. Because we all know the American voters are too stupid to think about things like Benghazi, pay-for-play corruption at the Clinton Foundation, smuggling of weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Cattlegate, Travelgate, Chinagate, Whitewater, all of that stuff. The American voters don't care about things like that, really. You know, this election was all about the promises made by Hilary, and that's all they should have been paying attention to. Krugman over at the New York Times is throwing this hideous tantrum, you know, saying that even if Trump becomes president, he doesn't deserve our obedience. He doesn't deserve the benefit of he's illegitimate right from day one. Talk about acting like spoiled children. And they're all out there screaming about, what about Russia's potential influence and interference in the election? Well, like I said before, Israel's been interfering in our elections for a very, very long time. Nobody seems to think that's a problem. You know, when AIPAC ganged up on people like Cynthia McKinney and kicked them out because they wouldn't go with Israel's agenda, nobody stood up and defended her as being the victim of foreign interference, did they? Now remember, Saudi Arabia is on record as saying they funded 20% of Hillary's presidential campaign. And they didn't give her that money just because they think she's a swell person. They were expecting favors back from a potential Clinton White House. The same thing with all the pay-for-play going on into the Clinton Foundation. Remember, the documents came on out during the investigation. The donors to the Clinton Foundation were expecting favors from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So why aren't the people screaming about Russia's interference in our elections getting on Saudi Arabia's case? And how about George Soros and all the money that he poured into Hillary's campaign, fanning up racism through Black Lives Matter to try and help the Hillary campaign? Why isn't anybody talking about how he interfered with our elections? Now, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia is out there demanding that Russia Today and Sputnik be labeled as foreign agents. They're agents of a foreign government. Ooh, bad, bad Russia Today, bad, bad Sputnik. But if you think about it by that same logic, Michael McFaul has now confirmed that American media, who were openly supportive of Hillary Clinton, were acting as official agents of the U.S. government and not an unbiased, objective source of news. And again, where was Michael McFaul all those years when Israel openly campaigned for this or that politician to win? Seems rather selective in his outrage, as it were. Another story coming out of the IB Times. Hillary Clinton would be president if it were not for the Comey email probe. Oh, if the election had been held before James Comey said the investigation was still underway, she'd be president. It's all Comey's fault. It's all the FBI fault. No, it isn't. Because if Hilary hadn't been breaking the rules in the first place, there wouldn't have been an investigation to begin with. Do you see this pattern here of a complete inability to take responsibility for their own actions? It's always somebody else's fault. Another story coming out from IntelliHub suggesting the CIA may try and push for a new election. Find some way to get this one so tangled up that they say, all right, Obama gets to stay in the White House for another 6 months, and we're going to have another election in June, and this time we'll succeed in stealing it for Hillary Rotten Clinton. Now, Dan Rather, who we mentioned last month, rose to network stardom. Oh, we just lost our connection to RBN, and I don't know why. Let's see if we can get that back. And there we go. Okay, and we're back on the air here. I don't know why we lost our connection. It could be some of Hillary's hackers. They've been after absolutely everything that we're doing here. Dan Rather, who we pointed out last month, rose to network stardom from a virtually unknown small market TV station by lying to the American people that he had been shown the Zapruder film of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and the headshot had rocketed Kennedy's head forward. Okay, of course, we know now that the Zapruder film was made public that Kennedy's head actually flung backward. Rather bought his network stardom lying for the assassins of President John F. Kennedy. So now he's out there jumping on board here saying about how our founding fathers warned about a demagogue president backed by a foreign adversary. You mean like all those recent U.S. presidents under Israel's control? Is that what you're talking about there, Dan? Or is it only a problem when it's not Israel who's in control of America's politicians? And maybe that's a big part of what's behind the corporate media ire. Yes, we want the U.S. president to be a puppet, but he's supposed to be Israel's puppet. He's not supposed to be Russia's puppet, or worse, independent. We can't deal with an independent America. He's got to be slaves to Israel. Now, last summer, the Huffington Post came out with an article that made a very good point. Who cared who leaked Clinton's emails? Okay, what people should focus on was the corruption exposed by the leaks. They're talking about the DNC email leaks, not the country or people suspected of uncovering such data. That was last summer. Today, the Huffington Post is running an article saying that Russia's hacking of the election is grounds for the courts to simply hand Hillary the White House. And again, there is no evidence Russia had anything to do with the DNC email leaks. Julian Assange has said it wasn't Russia. He implied it was Seth Rich, who was gunned down in the streets of Washington, D.C. about the same time. And amazingly enough, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, said that the DNC hacks were an American insider, because if it had been Russia, we never would have seen it, because Russia's just as good at hacking as the U.S. Nobody's been able to actually prove Stuxnet came from the United States. Russia's just as good at that. Now, Jack Berkman, who's a GOP lobbyist, has added another $5,000 to the existing reward for information on the murder of former Democratic National Committee employee Seth Rich. This brings the total reward right now to $150,000, which is the largest reward for information about a murder in the history of Washington, D.C. Now, Craig Murray, the former British ambassador, is saying this story about Russia hacking the U.S. election is bovine excrement. He used a different word, but I can't use that without risking the license of our radio affiliates. And by the way, Murray said he met the person who leaked the DNC emails, and it was an insider, not Russia. So what we have right now, to sum up, is apparently there is absolutely no basis for the Washington Post story that the CIA gave Congress a secret report which proves Russia hacked the election on behalf of Donald Trump. The CIA saying it never happened. Either somebody in Congress made it up, or the Washington Post was lying again. And given that recent smear job they did on us in the independent media, about how we're all official Russian propaganda outlets, I think the Washington Post is just kind of up to their old tricks. Now, David Ignatius, who's a columnist over at the Washington Post, wrote an editorial saying that truth is losing. Now, what he really means is the truth, according to the U.S. government, is what's losing. In other words, the propaganda. The lies are what's losing. Now, Trump is saying, if you want to talk about fake news, let's start with CNN and the CIA, because they certainly have been authors of some of the biggest whoppers in U.S. history. And don't forget, Hillary Clinton loved fake news. She was using it all during the campaign with all these allegations that Donald Trump had groped these women and done this and done that, all of which was discredited. Hillary Clinton loved fake news until she started losing. And now, the bad fake news people. And it's just completely hypocritical. And it shows once again that Hillary Clinton just says whatever she needs to say at that moment to win her argument. There's no actual consistent philosophy or policy behind her thinking, which is why she would have been a terrible president anyway. Now, let's not forget that it wasn't all that long ago that 50 intelligence analysts working out of CENTCOM went public complaining that their intelligence reports on ISIS and Al-Qaeda were being altered by senior government officials. So when they come on out and say CIA said this or FBI said that, you can't even believe that, because these things are being rewritten to suit a policy, to suit an agenda. And the whole world is watching this circus going on right now, and they're laughing at us. They're worried, but they're laughing. I got an email from somebody in Europe saying that they're concerned that if Hillary steals the White House, it'll be a civil war in this country, and because of economic globalism, that will have repercussions around the world. And if Hillary steals the White House and there isn't a civil war, nobody in Europe is going to listen to her as having any legitimacy or credibility. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. German politicians are worried about the striking increase in Russian propaganda and fake news, meaning the push for war. Trying to go back to the Cold War, the 1950s and 1960s. Oh, the Russians are doing terrible things. The Russians are torturing puppy dogs. The Russians are putting kittens in the dryer. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Donald Trump is out there mocking this Russian hacking conspiracy and reminding everybody, justifiably, this is coming from the same people who assured us Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Assad was gassing his own Alawite supporters with sarin gas. It's from the same people who botched the Bay of Pigs. The CIA is out there, or at least the Washington Post is out there, trying to treat the CIA like it's an unimpeachable source. And that's completely, utterly ridiculous. They're just trying to use one set of lies to bolster another set of lies to support another set of lies. And as I mentioned before, the only hard evidence that exists of any actual computer hacking related to this last election is down in Georgia, and that was coming from the Department of Homeland Security, which so far is not responding to requests from Georgia to find out what that was all about. Now, remember when the Washington Post did this smear job on the independent media? And they cited as their unimpeachable, trustworthy source a website called propornot.com, which is short for propaganda or not. And they had a list of 200 websites. I'm proud to say mine was one of them. And they just went to town saying, oh, they're all Russian propaganda outlets. And then the Washington Post was forced to pull on back and say, well, we're not really sure if this is accurate or not. We're merely reporting what Propornot said. And then everybody's saying, okay, well, who are they? And Propornot went to very great lengths to hide their origin, but it didn't work. They have been tracked down. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this Propornot website, which was the sole source for the Washington Post smear job on the independent media that we are all part of Russia's propaganda machine. And the Propornot website is registered through a private domain registration company, which is used to mask the actual owners and operators. Now, investigations have shown that the business address for the people behind Prop or Not is this one-room office in New Mexico that serves as a business address for some 30 to 40 different companies. That alone tells you right there something weird is going on when they're going to that much trouble to conceal who they really are. But according to this story that came out of Investment Watch blog, investigators have tracked this back and exposed Prop or Not as being a CIA operation, and apparently they were using Ukrainian propagandists as contractors, and apparently some of the giveaways are hidden inside some of the writings at the website. Now remember, after the Washington Post story, Prop or Not went back and explained their criteria for declaring somebody an official spokesman for Russia was you link to a story in Russia Today. Well, I also linked to whitehouse.gov, and so by Prop or Not's rationale, that makes me an official White House spokesperson, doesn't it? Or at least Washington Post. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I was going to say that Prop or Not is a CIA. Those are all that's a front business.
Yes.
You know, they had Bob Baer. I was flipping through the reruns of CNN interviews, and, you know, he's the one who says there needs to be a new election. And you know what he said? He says, you know, if we did this to democracies, interfered in somebody's vote, and then in the next sentence he goes, this is a revenge by Putin for what we did in the Ukraine. I'm like, so you just says we do. At first he says if we did this, and then he turns around and says we did it in Ukraine. I mean, the guy is. These people will tell you what they're doing if you listen. You know?
Well, yeah, but their attitude is it's okay for the U.S. to interfere in other people's elections, but not okay for them to interfere in ours. And the CIA has a long, long history of rigging elections in other countries as part of this ongoing program to bring about regime change in countries that we think ought to be more cooperative with American businesses. And so it's very hypocritical for them to be complaining about this. And Donald Trump made a really excellent point that if Hilary had won the election, and Trump's people had come on out and said, we'd like to look into the possibility of election fraud, he would have been denounced as a wacko tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist.
But they're scared now, Mike, because they're not doing all this for nothing. They're pulling out all their cards almost with their operatives and the media. Let me tell you, if Trump gets in, he'll purge the State Department and the CIA, and that's not what they want.
Oh, it's worse than that.
We're in a dangerous
it's worse than that.
History, Mike.
It's worse than that. I mean, a lot of people are looking at all these people who are going along with Hillary Clinton. They won't say no to her. They won't stop her. They won't do anything about it. And the reason is, after almost a quarter of a century, 30 years actually, crimes and corruption going all the way back to the Iran-Contra gun and drug running operation out of Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton, the Clintons have the blackmail goods on everybody in power. And Hillary, early in the year, had said, if I don't win the White House, I'm going to start ruining people. And nobody wants to be at the top of that list when she starts releasing all this information. Because on the day when she realizes she's not going to get that White House, when it finally sinks into her, she's going to start blowing the whistle on everybody and send a lot of people to jail. We might even see a bug out of the top level of the government just heading for the border and getting on out before the handcuffs start showing up.
It's just a shame. There's rogue elements in all of our institutions that can be seen by now. But I mean, you do have Ray McGovern, who was in the CIA, and William Binney, who was in the NSA, who came out. They've been purged out. What Trump needs to do is purge these bad elements out and put the good elements back in. But they're not going to let him do that because you know what happened to JFK.
Yeah. I mean, right now, if Hillary can't steal the White House at the Electoral College, the next step is going to be assassination. And I hate to say it, I don't want to see it happen, but that's definitely where they're going. All right, well, listen, Dustin, we got to take a break for commercials. Do you have anything more to say?
Oh, no, thanks, Mike.
All right, we'll be back with more phone calls after these few words.